Let's get into the updated snow totals. Snow may be trying to push past the Appalachian Mountains out east, and who could see an active winter pattern around Thanksgiving and for the month of December. It's November 9th, 2025. Let's get into the weather updates. We currently have winter storm warnings up through portions of northeastern Illinois, northwestern Indiana, and southwestern Michigan. Here's our low pressure system, and a lot of this rainfall is beginning to turn to snow on the back end. We're going to see the system continue to move off to the east and then north and east, and as it moves out of the way, this very cold air from the north is going to sink over Lake Michigan. This is what's going to really enhance that lake effect snow through portions of northeastern Illinois and northwestern Indiana. And then eventually some of that moisture will be pulled down into the Ohio Valley as we get later into Sunday and into Monday morning. Here's the National Blended Model's most updated snow totals. It's still expecting 7 to 9 inches through portions of northeastern Illinois and then northern Indiana. Look at this, maybe 10, 11 inches. In western Michigan, as we move through the day and get into Monday, we're going to see more of a northwesterly flow. That's going to pull a lot of snow into your coast as well. Inner New England still looking pretty decent, including the potential for 1 inch to 2 inches into Pittsburgh. Right now, the national blend really likes northwestern and northern Ohio, but it's still giving a little bit of love down here through portions of central to southern Indiana, and then through eastern Kentucky, and then out down through the Appalachian Mountain Range. Taking a look at our 06C HRRR run from last night, we can actually see this spin coming off the lake and then beginning to move down into the southeast. You can see this vorticity right here. Here's the center of our low, and this is going to be aiming towards southern Appalachia. As we push through Monday, we'll see this moisture push up against the southern Appalachian Range and then attempt to actually move over the mountains. You can see with this run, it's trying to put some snow out through portions of North Carolina. Some of the other models think some of that snow gets over into Virginia. If this moisture does make it past the mountains, don't expect much, maybe a dusting to a 1/4 inch. But again, the Euro was showing this early on, and now our short range models are starting to entertain it as well. Let's look a little bit ahead here and see what happens after this storm moves out. You can see our trough digging to the southeast, bringing that record cold air. And then as we get into Wednesday and Thursday, our polar jet is continuing to try and pull cold air into the upper Midwest and then some moisture into New England. And we still have that ridging out west, although it looks like as we get into this upcoming weekend, that's likely going to change. Large storm system begins to move into the coast, and we get a ton of moisture for the west. Again, this is mostly rain down at low elevations and snow up at high elevations, and this might lead to a cool down out here as well. As we get into the end of next weekend and then into Monday, November 17th, we see some troughing try to push down into the northwest with continued storm systems. This is all the way at the end of the run though, but it's going to try and bring a little bit of that heat relief out west. The main thing that I'm watching here is the amount of moisture we're seeing piling up. This is our 6 to 10 day precipitation outlook from the Climate Prediction Center, and you can clearly see what it wants to do out west. This is a lot of precipitation over the next 10 days, especially for these desert regions. And it does look like our eastern seaboard will see a little bit of a break. The European is seeing a couple of chances for more snowfall out east as we push through the middle of November. You can see as we get into November 19th, 20th. We have another clipper system trying to push down through the northern plains and then potentially another snowstorm behind it attempting to move out east. Now this is the end of the run, but as I've been saying, we are expecting a brief mid-November warm-up before we see a potential polar vortex breakdown near the end of November, triggering a very potentially cold end to November and December for many in the states. It may not just be the east, it may be from the west to the east coast, but we're going to get into that in a little bit. And by the way, if you like content like this, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell. I make posts like this every morning and I live stream every day to try and answer all of your weather related questions. Back to the video. Let's take a quick look at our 2-week temperature anomalies. We already know all this cold air is diving into the southeast. Look at this. This is going to set records down here in the southeast, as I said. We're already on pace to set records for max temp in northern Illinois for this time of year. And check out what's happening through portions of the Ohio Valley and southeast as we get into Monday. Tons of max temperature records being set. And pretty much the entire state of Florida is expected to break temperature records on Tuesday. It's early November and Florida may not see any location reach 70 degrees on Tuesday. I promise you that's not normal. Now, as we push out past Tuesday and get into Wednesday, here comes some heat really moving in from coast to coast. We're going to try to stay cool along the eastern seaboard, although that's not going to hold on forever. As we get into this weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, there comes that heat for the east, although we do still try and remain cool, at least up in New England, and I've talked about that as well. There's really a cold pattern for New England throughout November. And you can see that as we get into the 18th, 19th, 20th. New England's the one area that wants to remain cold. Now, as we get towards the end of the run, do we see this cool down for out west and then into the plains? Again, this is the end of the run, but this is that suggestion that as we get into the end of November, we could really start to see some cold air from coast to coast. If we have that breakdown of the polar vortex, I don't think this would be triggered by that quite yet, but again, we'll wait for more details. This is our European weekly 500 millibar height anomaly map, and watch what happens as we get into December. You can see this troughing out east, and you can see these higher heights over Greenland. So again, if we do get some Greenland blocking, if we do get some Alaskan ridging with this troughing down over the states, a lot of this cold air and this active winter storm track is going to favor the east. And watch as we push through December. it just holds out east, and it holds out east. So if this model does somewhat verify, our chances for a white Christmas out east are skyrocketing. Although not every model does see this outcome, but this is the European model, and it is one of the better models at predicting these things. The Canadian model did pretty good with temperature outlooks last winter, and look at what it has in store for us in December. Again, a lot of cold anomalies up to the north. Not surprising, we're in a La Nina, a weak La Nina, but still a La Nina. And you can see it's really favoring cooler air out east than out west. You do have the far northwest and northern Rockies, though, getting in on some of these cold anomalies if the Canadian's correct. But again, not every model agrees. The CFS thinks it's going to be hot for everyone. Do I think this is going to happen? Probably not. All right, so temperature-wise, winter storm-wise, what's Thanksgiving time looking like and the month of December? Well, if you want a cold end to November and a cold December, this is exactly what you want to see. This is a negative AO practically all the way until January. Again, a negative AO or negative Arctic oscillation suggests we could be having a breakdown of our polar vortex, and it may be a little bit unstable, allowing some of that colder air to sink down into the states. On our control, it looks very negative. So right now, it's looking like Thanksgiving could be really cold. Again, this is just a model. Things change, but I'm showing you the data we have currently. And negative NAO looks to be set up around Thanksgiving time as well, with the positive PNA. So right now, Thanksgiving looks potentially cold and snowy for some across the east, maybe a little bit warmer across the west. If this changes, if it starts to look like it's going to favor the west, believe me, I'll be the first to tell you. And then our outlook for December, again, a negative AO. This favors cold air down into the states, really from coast to coast. But we've got to take a look at a couple other things. Look at this suggestion of a very negative NAO as we get into the second and third week of December. Again, this favors colder air and an active winter storm track out east. Although we do see our NAO trying to go positive as we get into the end of our first week of December. And within EPO and PNA trying to push back to neutral to negative, we may actually see in the first or second week of November a big push of cold air and snow out west. Again, though, the overall outlook, if you were to believe the European model, does still favor the east for winter storms and that cold air as we approach Christmas. So why does the European Teleconnections see such a cold December, maybe even start to January for the United States, maybe from coast to coast, maybe just for the east? Well, this is our stratosphere, and I talked about this in our last video. This is a good representation of why our Teleconnections think that we're going to have a negative AO or negative Arctic oscillation. As we begin to push through November into mid-November and late November, watch these higher heights and these really heat anomalies that are going to start to build up over the Arctic. And I can tell you right now, the GFS and Canadian agree. As this happens, these winds that rotate around the Arctic, that hold in the coldest air on the planet up there in the stratosphere, begin to slow. The polar vortex begins to break down. And as that polar vortex begins to break down, cold Arctic air becomes displaced at lower latitudes, and it can begin rotating around at those lower latitudes, which is what gives us the opportunity to see these record-breaking cold days, kind of like what we're seeing down in the southeast right now, because we do have an unstable polar vortex currently. Although this breakdown looks to be more intense, meaning, who knows, especially depending on our MJO cycle and other factors, we could see even colder anomalies as we get into December and January. And remember, that's the peak of winter. That's the type of situation, if you do have the biggest breakdowns in those months, where you can get, like what happened last year, a foot of snow along the Gulf. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but a polar vortex breakdown as we get into the end of November and into December can definitely trigger a very, very cold winter for the United States. I appreciate you guys watching this video. Like I said, I make posts like this every single day, and I live stream every single day to try and answer all of your weather-related questions. If you like this type of content, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell, and I'll see you in the next video or the next live stream.